Hey John, we should be live now. I just want to take a moment and say thank you so much for attending my event, and for anyone who's watching. Sorry about being a few minutes late. And right now you can probably see me, but John he doesn't have webcam, so we're just gonna be talking to John and listening to his story rather than watching him, which is all good. So John, I just honestly wanna kind of I guess set out an agenda and let the audience know that what we're going to be going through. As I've told you before, I want to just kind of go through your journey, and just by knowing what I know about you, I know you made a lot of progress through your career. Um, when you began, you were just an analyst, and by working hard and going through all of that stuff, at the end, I mean, you made it to being a trade compliance manager position, and that's
Mhm.
where you are right now. So
Yeah.
I just want to kind of hand it over to you so you can talk about your background, what you do now, and then we can kind of go back. And I want to kind of focus on how you begin, first thing,
Sure.
and what made you come into trade compliance.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I got into the workplace in like 2008. So it was when the economy was not doing so hot, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and I had an undergrad in psychology, so I really didn't have any skills to enter the workplace or workforce with, and so it was really tricky. And I remember thinking, oh, I really should have gone to school and come out with a trade of some sort. And so I
Mm-hmm.
really started to look into, jobs that would offer me a career, and it was funny because I just remember thinking I really need to find a career that's going to be a trade, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of fell into it. So I took an internship at a generic drug manufacturer, ironically in HR, and then the second week I was there, they asked me to move into supply chain just by
Mm-hmm.
attrition. And yeah, that turned into logistics, which then
Mm.
opened the door for me to get a contract role at J&J. And then that's where I really kind of like catapulted me because so I worked at a 3PL on site at J&J.
Mhm. Okay.
And yeah, and that's where I got a lot of exposure. So I worked with a retired customs investigator. His name was
Mhm.
Mike Scott, and he
Mm.
basically kind of showed me the ropes on trade compliance. It's like, hey, if you get your broker's license, you can really make a career out of this.
Mhm.
And that's what I did. So I started studying for my broker's license, and I just always tried to make myself think about, if I was going into an interview, what would make me the most marketable going into an
Mhm.
interview. So I knew the
Mhm.
broker's license was important. I thought getting the MBA would make up for having a psychology undergrad, in the sense that it was like a pseudoscience or a liberal arts undergrad.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I know how you feel. Initially, when I was in doing my bachelor's, I did my bachelor's in biochemistry,
mhm,
and then I didn't want to go into research and any of that stuff. So at the end, I also kind of ended up doing an MBA because I wanted to go towards more the business side of things,
mhm.
and because of that, I to me it was the same thing. I just happened to land in trade compliance. I was looking for jobs, and then I ended up with internship with San and Travis at that time.
Oh, okay.
It was by chance, nothing I was planning. It was just something I fell into, and I feel like a lot of people that I talk to, pretty much almost everyone, it's kind of like they didn't know what trade compliance was before they fell into it, right? It's just you apply for jobs, and if there's an entry level open for this kind of a position, then you kind of just fall into it, and then from there on, it's either you like it or you hate it. There's no between.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Hmm.
Yeah, some of my peers that we were at the same level when I was at the 3PL, I remember they were just like, "I hate this. Like, I gotta get out of
Hmm.
this." Yeah, and so you either love it or you don't. I like the complexity of it. Like, I like
Hmm.
that there's so many different things you can do with it, right? Like you
Yeah.
could be a valuation expert, you could be classification, you could be
Hmm.
trade. Like, there's just so much to do. Uh,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that's
I know. I love the same thing. I love the fact that at least in where I've been or where I initially, I was doing one thing, right? As an intern or as an analyst, you do one thing, but then I wanted to progress because I wanted to do more. So right now, I love the fact that I pretty much do everything. I'm involved in
Yep.
pretty much everything, and that kind of keeps me going. I like the complication. I like the fact that I can learn more, and there's always something new to learn every single day. It's not like you can know everything. No matter how high you go, one day you can become the president of a company or CEO or something. You can be running a company, a trade compliance company, but even then you won't know every single thing. One, because it's so much regulation, and two, because it's constantly changing every single day.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. Yeah. Yeah, you need a solid team or you need good resources or trade. Yeah, it's funny, like when you interview for roles and they ask
Hmm.
you, like, do you know all these things? And you have to be honest. You have to say no. Like you can't. Sometimes, like I've been in interviews and they'll say, "Do you know how to import into Brazil? Do you know how to import into China? Do you know how to import into Australia? Do you know how to import all these different countries?" And it's like, well, I don't think anybody knows how to import into all those countries, right? Like you have to know how to leverage your resources and your trade network to.
Yeah.
So, like some people might be more experienced in different countries, but
Hmm.
but that's definitely true. Like that's this field is like so expansive and diverse that it,
Hmm.
and has so much depth to it that it's just never ending. It kind of reminds me of like in sports, it's like golf or something. Like
Hmm.
it just there's so much to learn. Like you can never be perfect at it. So
Yeah. Uh, I've never played golf, but I feel like golf seems much easier than trade compliance.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
know, and like you said, no one can know everything. The biggest thing is to know where to go and how to find stuff. That's what matters, right? I mean,
exactly.
for example, if you're a global trade compliance leader, you're not going to know every single thing about every single country in the world. That's just simply not possible. Every single country, even sometimes every region inside a country, they have their own rules and regulations, and it's pretty much impossible to know every single thing. So, as a trade compliance leader, you have to kind of know where to go to find that specification, that valuation, or for example, that certain thing that you're looking for. That's what matters.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. The other thing I like about trade is you wind up being other than maybe like legal, the law department and like finance, you wind up being like one of the few roles in a company that talks to almost every department. Like
Hmm.
that to me, that's like exciting. Or like you work with marketing, you work with finance, you work with
Hmm.
the law department, you work with supply chain, like you work with so many different departments. Like you're
Yeah.
like such a cornerstone. So
Hmm. Yeah, you're pretty much involved in everything. I mean, from legal to transportation to purchasing, you talk to everyone, and you have to, because if you don't, you're probably not doing your job right, and you're
exactly.
costing the company money, honestly, because you have to be proactive in a lot of things. If you're not being proactive, then you won't know unless you've lost some money for the company, and that's something you don't want to do that.
Yep,
So,
exactly. Yep.
mhm. So a lot of people sometimes I have people sending me emails or just sending me messages on YouTube because they want to know what they can do to kind of represent them better. Sometimes they have trade compliance experience, sometimes they don't.
Hmm.
So when you interview someone, or if someone
Hmm.
is just applying to an entry level job, or even like something that's a mid level job, whether they know they have the experience or not, how should they approach that kind of a job? What kind of skills, if it's not trade compliance skills, what kind of skills should they be focusing on, and how should they approach those kind of jobs?
Hmm. Yeah, I think early in the career, it's like getting the most exposure you can to the different things in
Hmm.
trade, right? Like,
Hmm.
I think it's, I think the folks in trade compliance that have like the best experience or backgrounds are the ones that have been on the brokerage side and the importer side,
Hmm.
right? Because they've been on both sides of the
Right,
fence. Like, they often have
right,
the most to offer because they can tell you how it works on both sides. So,
right. I think the difficult part about that is when you have these kind of companies, whether you brokerages, 3PLs, or transportation companies, or someone else. A lot of times they have people which specialize in just one topic. For example, if you're working with a broker, you might be good on entry, you might be good at classification, but it's hard for people to kind of they gain that experience, which is going to be more than what they're being offered. So it's
Mhm.
either it's kind of like you need the experience to go forward, but you
Mhm.
can't really get the experience because you don't have it. So
That's
it's kind
true.
of like a two-edged sword, you know. So how do people overcome that fact?
Well, no, that's definitely true. I mean, you have to seek it out and either be at a company that will allow that for you to do kind of like lift and shift work and work with your peers and learn,
Mm-hmm.
or you have to take calculated risks. I mean, like earlier in my career, I had shorter tenures at positions, so that way I could learn and learn and leave and learn, right? So like,
Yeah.
like I stayed at the 3PL for a year and then went to Merck and I was there for 2 years, but I learned so much by moving like and doing those shorter stints. And then now
Mm-hmm.
I've been at 5 year stints and like, so I'm staying in longer periods now. I'm more mature in my career, but earlier in my career, I was not afraid to move to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and it helped me. And I learned so much more. Whereas I think everybody's different, has a different path, but you have to know what you're trying to accomplish and where you want to go, and then set
Mm-hmm.
your like where do you want to be. Like early in my career, I knew I wanted to be a trade compliance manager and then eventually a
Mm-hmm.
director and lead a program. So I tried to think, well, what's going to get me to that point? And I looked
Mm-hmm.
at what others had that were doing that, and then I tried to mirror what they had
Mm-hmm.
and like the experience, and and that's what's worked for me.
Mhm. No, I get you, and sometimes you also have to kind of do some volunteering, which sucks. It's kind of like working without getting paid.
Yep.
But when you're working at like a company where you're doing just one thing, sometimes they have these, I guess, programs or where they're looking for volunteers to, for example, do auditing or different kind of things. So you can kind of step up and say you want to be a part of that, just to have that experience, that exposure, so you can put that on your resume, right? And you can also kind of, if you do that, that shows that you're working proactively and making sure that you want to learn more. And I think that helps too, like on your resume, if you're applying somewhere, the fact that you, if you can show that you want to have progress, that looks good, in my
Hmm.
opinion. Because
Yep.
sometimes, like I said, you need experience to go forward, but at the same time you might not have that experience, so you have to be able to show that you're willing to work for that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do whatever is best for you and what you think
Mm-hmm.
is best. Because I can tell you from my experience, like you can go in an interview and have somebody interview you and say, "Oh, well, you moved around too much in your early career," and it can
Mm-hmm.
work against you. But it doesn't matter because then the next interview they might be like, "That's great, you learned all these things so quickly. You have such
Yeah.
diverse experience, so it can work for you, it can work against you. You just need to do
Mm-hmm.
whatever you think is best for yourself." And
Yeah.
everybody has
Mm-hmm.
their own path. So
I agree, and I always tell people honestly, I feel like whether it's honestly our um, trade compliance portion or if it's some other career, in my opinion, luck has a lot to do with that. For example, like you said, at one interview, the person could not like the fact that you moved around a lot. On the other hand, the next interview you go to, the people might love the fact that you went through so much different kind of things, you know.
right.
So it a lot of times I feel like in any career, honestly, the luck is always involved. You just have to
Yep.
be at the right place at the right time. And sometimes for that, you just have to try. You have to take that risk. You have to
Mhm.
apply and to get that experience to get to that place. And without that, I mean, you might get a lot of rejections, but that should be fine with you. You know, I mean, you're learning as much as you can wherever you are. You're giving them everything that you can, which is totally fine. But it's okay if you want to try to learn or be more.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
so I also wanted to ask you. So, throughout your career, I mean, you made progress. So, what made you different than your peers? Like, I'm sure you had other people that were probably that started with you, but they didn't make as much progress as you, or maybe they made it faster, or maybe not as fast as they wanted to. So, what made you successful, where it kind of pushed back on others?
I just set very clear goals for myself. So I focused on what would make me the most marketable in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was the broker's license. I knew getting an MBA from
Mm-hmm.
a very good school would help. And
Mm-hmm.
I focused on those things. And I wasn't successful at first. I mean, I took the broker's license exam, excuse me, the first pass I did not pass. So I had to
When
take it
did you take
twice.
that?
October 2012. Oh, no, that's the one I passed. April 2011 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
when they had the paper ones, right?
yeah. It was a long like the way they do it now. It's like to me, I think they make it easier for everybody now. But um, and then I passed. Eventually, I passed. But so I took it twice. Um, and then I got my MBA at the same time. So, but I was hyper focused on
Mm-hmm.
knocking it out quickly and not procrastinating. So that way I could get ahead early in my career so that I could have a
Mm-hmm.
long runway of having like higher earnings and being in a management track at a younger age. So that way I could have
Mm-hmm.
higher earnings for a longer period. That was my intentional focus. And it worked to an extent. Um, and then the other thing I think is just I was really dedicated really early on. So I
Mm-hmm.
sacrificed a lot. Like when I was studying for the brokerage exam and MBA, like at that point, I didn't have a family yet. So I gave
Mm-hmm.
up nights and weekends, I was working at Merck at the time and I would work 8 to 5 and then go to class from 6 to 9
Mm-hmm.
and then come home and study and then start all over again. So it takes a lot
Yeah.
of dedication. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's like the fruits of the labor, right?
No, I know what you mean. I pretty much done the same thing. I feel like, especially in this career, if you want to make progress, you have to have that mentality, that kind of focus, because without that, it's hard to succeed because you gotta work extra, you gotta do extra, you gotta kind of push yourself to learn more.
Yep.
These are the things that you have to do to make progress. But if you do it, it's worth it at the end. It's kind of like you put in the work now, so you benefit in the future. But if you
Exactly.
don't put in the work now, it's if you think about it, it's kind of like what the same as like with workout. If you want to work out, if you want to have a long, healthy life, a fit body, for example, you got to start there right now. You can't wait until you're 60 because by that time,
Yep.
it's probably too late.
Yep. Yeah. Well, like my grandmother used to always say, like the time is going to come and go either way. So you
Hmm.
might as well like put in the effort and get it done because either way
Yeah.
it's going to come and go. So you might as well help your future self and do the work now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
So,
I get you, and you have to make that decision. You have to be able to realize what you want. And like you said, some people don't. Some people are satisfied. For example, if it's an easy job, if they're just doing one thing and they're good at it, some people just want to stay there, or some people
yeah.
just want to change careers. So
Yeah.
everyone is different. You can't really know. So you have to see what works for you.
Yep.
If you want to succeed, if you want to move forward, you gotta just kind of step up the game for yourself. It's gonna be hard work, but that hard work is gonna pay off at the end.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah. So John, also, I wanted to kind of ask you and kind of give people a broader perspective of what we actually do in trade compliance, I guess, because sometimes what's on paper or what people think we do might not be the same as what you actually do. So, what does what does a day look like for you? I mean, when you're working or when you were working, what does it entail? What do you do throughout the day? Is it one thing? Is it different things? I know we said that it's a very complex field
Hmm.
where you're interacting with everyone, but at the same time, depending on what your role is, which company you're at,
Hmm.
and whether you're focusing on one topic or the other, your day can differentiate a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
on one hand, you can be a trade compliance manager, but then you could be just focused on imports. You could be a trade compliance manager, but you're in a company where they're so focused on export they don't do any imports. So
Yep.
so on your side, what does the day look like for you?
I've always been in healthcare, so it's been very government agency focused with like FDA,
Mm-hmm.
USDA. At the last company I was at, I was leading the program, so
Mm-hmm.
I had oversight globally over everything. So I would work on indirect tax savings. So I would find, inefficiencies in spend and root cause like, free trade agreements that we could use or 301 tariff reductions that weren't being utilized. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I would work with procurement to source from different locations. Um, tariff engineering, things of that effect.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also manage the day-to-day business to make sure shipments were clearing timely and
Mm-hmm.
so, and then just doing compliance checks and doing audits,
Mm-hmm.
working with FDA to make sure our shipments were in compliance and clearing,
Mm-hmm.
quickly. So I mean, it's always been like so broad for me in the last few years that early in my career it was very much more siloed. Like I would do classification or I would do country
Mm-hmm.
of origin. It was more tactical. But later in my career in management, it's been more broad. It's been more, I'm working on it. I'm working on strategies. I'm working on ways to
Mm-hmm.
help the business save a lot of money and also managing the day to day business.
Right. And and I feel like it's important for some people to know that sometimes as a trade compliance manager, like what you said, you do a lot, you're pretty much involved in everything, and you probably have people under you, reporting to you. But
Mhm.
sometimes, again, like I said before, depending on the company, that could change. Sometimes you're a trade compliance manager,
Mhm.
but we they don't have a big team. In fact, you're the only team in the entire company. So depending on which company you're in or which industry you're in, your team could be really, really big, or on the other hand, it could just be you. So you have to understand that, and before you even go into it, and I guess before you even want that progress, you have to know that you could fall pretty much anywhere. You
Right.
could be the one that does everything, or you could be the one that just manages other people and focus on strategy, like you said. So
Right.
that's something that people have to know. It's not the same. It's never the same. It's never the same at two different companies.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And it varies by volume, right? Like
Mhm,
product types. Like yeah, it's just totally different. Every company is totally different. How the supply chain is set up. Like, are they
mhm,
on back order all the time? Are they not? Like, how do they carry their inventory? Like, it's every company is so different. So,
mhm.
where are they
And
shipping
so
from? Like,
and sometimes you at least in my experience, sometimes you have to work outside of normal business hours as well, because of the nature of the job, I mean,
mhm,
we're pretty in tight or pretty close to transportation. So, and that can happen anytime. That could be over the weekend, depending on the company and the industry. I mean, what they need when they need it. So you could be working over the weekend. It's not like it's that kind of job where it's pretty much 9 to 5. I mean, it can vary. I mean, there could be a lot of work, there could be less work, depending on the industry, depending on the company, or depending on what you actually do.
yep, I agree for sure.
Yeah. Also, so what do you do to keep up with all the ever-changing regulation that's happening right now, that's happened in the past? Is there, for example, some people they they would just do their own thing and just Google stuff whenever they want to do.
Yeah.
On the other hand, some people have joined some organizations where they kind of provide updates. So on your side of things, what have you done to stay kind of up to date with the regulation, or to kind of know what might happen or what might not happen?
I subscribe to a lot of different, trade organizations and their
Mm-hmm.
messages. I mean, for customs, I'll subscribe to the CSMS, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then utilize the trade network, your forwarders and your brokers. That helps. So it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a combination of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And like always, like I said before, like a thousand other things, it really depends on the way you are, I mean, and how much time you're going to spend. Some people attend a lot of webinars, for example, or seminars. On the other hand, some people just prefer stuff coming in their email so they could stay up to date with everything. And everyone is different. For example, with me, I do attend webinars here and there, but a lot of times I find it faster and easier just to Google the regulation on my own to find what's
Hmm.
going on.
Hmm.
And I kind of stay up to date with everything just because of that.
Hmm.
On the other hand, there are people who just prefer to go to webinars and to take in the information that's been given to them. So everyone is different. But
Hmm.
again, even when you become a trade compliance manager, you kind of have to decide how you wanna proceed with managing the trade compliance at your company.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
tend to utilize just because I'm so time constrained. I tend to utilize more of the information being sourced to me, and then I'll look at the actual, CFR or CSMS messages or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
but I definitely am more reliant on those services to broadcast it to me, and so I subscribe very broadly. So I cast a wide net to make sure I don't miss anything.
Hmm. Yeah, that's smart because you never know what's gonna hit your company or what kind of regulations gonna change. So in case something does happen that's outside of the norm, you want to make sure that you have some kind of notification coming towards you. You know,
Yep,
so that's pretty
exactly.
smart.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So also, so for the people who I had a couple of people who reached out to me because they didn't have a trade compliance background, but they wanted to enter into trade compliance. So to those people, how would you, what kind of I guess advice would you give them, and how should they proceed with going forward with, for example, their applications or looking for jobs, and what kind of industry do you think they're most likely to get a job in, because even though they don't have trade compliance experience?
Yeah, I mean, probably the brokerage side or forwarding side is the easiest to break into, I would think, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, if they wanted to invest, they could always go for the broker license, and if they get it, then they have that credential over somebody else
Hmm.
who doesn't, right? I mean, but that's you're having to invest, so it's how much you want to invest in yourself. But so I think those are kind of the two paths. I do think it's
Hmm.
more difficult to get a role with an importer having no experience in trade right off the bat, unless you're already
Hmm.
working for that importer in another capacity. I've seen that happen, where people pivot and then they learn, but they're generally already working there. Or they have a different skill set that can help, like they're really good with analytics or something to that effect. I've seen that happen in two
Hmm.
instances. They were both two different people that were really strong with data analytics, and they didn't know trade, and then we bolted the trade onto them in terms of knowledge, and they became trade professionals. But I
Hmm.
think to answer your question, I think if they were really entry level, probably the brokerage forwarder side is more easy to crack into than the importer side.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And before they even go into this career, they have to realize that it might take a bit of time. For example, like you said, it's easier to get into the field to the brokerage side or freight forwarding side,
Right.
because they have those entry level position where you can actually learn stuff. But then again, at the same time, you have to remember that it might take some time before you start exploring other topics or actually be where you want to be. So that's something you have to know before you even start applying to those kind of jobs, and you should be okay with that.
Right.
It's kind of like a long-term strategy, and you have to be okay with having that kind of thinking as well.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, you always have to play the long game. I don't think you
Yeah.
can walk into it and get a manager role and trade, and you wouldn't want one either. Like the liability would be so high not knowing what you're
Hmm.
doing, right?
Yeah, there's that side, right? I mean, you're responsible for trade compliance, so I mean, if something goes wrong, then it falls on you, and
Exactly.
if you don't know enough, then I mean, that's not a good thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
a dangerous role in the sense that if you don't know what you're doing and you're in the role, it's the worst thing possible because the stakes are
Mm-hmm.
so high, especially depending on what sector you're in, right?
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're in an industry where they have controlled items, I
Exactly.
mean that's probably not something you just want to dive into. You
Mhm.
have to have some kind of experience before, because if you don't, you're gonna run into a lot of trouble,
Mhm. Yep,
right?
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So, so Jonathan, throughout your career, what are some of the top, I would say, some of the top trade compliance skills that you've seen in trade professionals, and some of the non-trade compliance skills you've seen with the trade compliance professionals that's actually helped them make progress throughout their careers?
Definitely the data analytics has been huge. Project management has been huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, what else? I'm trying to think. Data analytics, project management. There was one other that I had that came to mind. It's in my mind at the moment. But I think both of those are really important. Oh, systems, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like the folks that know like SAP or Oracle
Mm-hmm.
really well, like that's so huge, because they can, depending on what company they work on, they can, they can really leverage their systems knowledge to plug in the trade piece. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely helps, and if they know, I guess, if they know how to read blueprints and stuff, because that's essential for classification, right? So if they know
Yeah.
that, um, so someone with an engineering background, I guess, it would be beneficial to them as well. So when we talk about systems, though, how deeply have you ever need to use that system? For example, through my career, I mean, I've used everything: Oracle, SAP, and a lot of old system as well. Windchill, PML, whatever it's called right now. So I've used a lot of systems, but it's mostly pretty much to obtain the data, whether it was a bill of materials, blueprints, um, if depending on what kind of trade information they had stored on there. So I've pretty much learned all those systems. But
Mhm.
on your side, what kind of experience have you had, and how deeply have you gone with these different kind of systems?
And my last role, I implemented integration point. Two roles prior to that, I implemented Amber Road. So I've had a lot of exposure to different GTC specific programs
Mm-hmm.
and implementations. But I've also worked with SAP, Oracle. So I've had pretty good
Mm-hmm.
exposure to all of them, not all of them, but to a lot of different ERPs and then trade specific systems or modules.
Yeah, that definitely helps. I always find the issue with that is though, depending on which company you go to, the systems can be so different.
Yeah.
They're never the same. It's like one company would be using Oracle for everything, and then the next company would be using SCP, and then a third
Mhm.
company would be using something which is completely different.
Well,
So it's hard to always apply what you know to the new company which you want to work at.
right. Well, and how they manage the data and how they define the data standards is really important too, right? Like how they define the way they're populating the data can be different,
Yeah.
and that's very
Mhm.
important to understand. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that varies too. Even within the same system, it could be very different on how they actually use the data or store the data inside the system. So it can be even though it's the same system, it
mm,
can look like a completely different system.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess one other question that people always ask me is a lot of people which are on YouTube, they're either studying for the custom broker exam or they want to take the exam. So if you were to if someone would come to you and ask you on your advice on what they should be doing to make sure they pass the exam, or so what should they be doing to make sure they have a high chance of passing the exam, what
Mhm.
kind of advice would you give them at that time?
So I actually used to teach a course at Grossmont Community College with a peer in the trade, and so I have some good experience there. I think the best thing you can do is once you're exposed to the CFR, you have to take practice exams and time them. I don't
Mm-hmm.
recommend taking the full test. Like I feel like that's a huge time commitment to do the practice exams. What I would do is do like I would parcel them out. So I would take 4 and 5 questions and I would time it. Okay, 5 questions, you have whatever it is, 15 minutes. And I would practice.
Mm-hmm.
I would see, did I finish in less than 15 minutes? So you start to build up like your brain stamina in terms of test taking. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's also some really good, I really like the logistics training systems. I think it's called.
I
I
think I've
found,
heard of that.
I found they were excellent. Everybody I've ever recommended that has used them has passed for what it's worth. So I use
Nice.
them. So I really like them a lot.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah, I've heard people mention that name, but I've never actually like
Yeah, they're
spoken
very
with
they're
them or
very good.
with them.
I'm really fond of them. So, but
Okay.
I think yeah, the practice exams are very important because the fatigue of taking that long of a test is can
Mm-hmm.
really weigh on you.
Yeah.
But
So,
the other thing is like just going there, like knowing where you're going. I did hear that they're going to do a remote test this next go round.
yeah, they put something up. I guess it's a limited number of people. If you're interested, then you can take a remotely proctored exam. So I'm guessing they would have a webcam cam on,
Yeah,
and they would probably be watching you. And
yeah,
who knows, maybe before they even do that, they might have someone come in to make sure everything is proper for them for the exam. But I feel like that's a risk as an exam taker who has been studying for 4 to 6 months ahead of time. Um, taking something that's new that's never been
Yeah,
tested before,
right,
it's
right,
a risk, you know.
for
and
sure.
and I feel like every single time CBP tries something new, whether it's they also have electronic versions of the regulation and HTS book on the exam as well, and they tried that last time.
Mhm.
But there was a lot of issues with those kind of electronic regulation. Every time someone or most people, I guess, try to use them, the computer would freeze or crash
Oh,
down.
really? Okay.
So yeah, so a lot of people had issues, and then depending on, it's not like if you had issues, they would let you retake the exam. It's kind of like if you had certain
Yeah,
number of issues or for a certain amount of time, only then they would let you retake the exam for free. So
okay.
so I feel like taking the exam from home, that's even a step further. You're kind of like, you spend so much money for registering for the exam. You spend so much time and effort, 4 to 6 months probably at least, to get ready for the exam. And if something goes wrong, then I mean, they won't let you retake the exam for free at least, That's
Yeah,
never gonna happen because to them, they're just watching through the webcam. If the webcam goes black for whatever reason, maybe you lost connection, then
right.
that's it.
Yeah, then
You're
you're
done.
well, to me, it's not even the financial loss, it's the time, right? Then you have to wait another 6 months. I mean, that to me is
Yeah,
worth so much more than the $150 or whatever it is
yeah, and
you
I
lose.
don't understand why the exam is only twice per year. I'm assuming they do it because they want to control the number of people who have a license,
Yeah, I think
because
that's
that's the
why.
only thing that makes sense. Otherwise, with the electronic exams that we have and these exam sites, I mean, technically you should be able to go in at any time throughout the year and take that exam.
Yeah, I think that's why. I think it's like, uh, some sort of population control of number of brokers.
Yeah, yeah, and the funny thing is, I feel like um, a lot of people, um, even for the current exams, they once people take the exam, they actually choose how much the points they're gonna give back, or how many number of questions they're gonna accept the appeal for, based on how many people they want to pass and how many people they
Mhm.
want to have that license. And if for some reason they feel like there are too many people with the broker's license, then they won't give you back anything even if you appeal. On the other hand, if that number goes down because who knows, maybe the licenses are expiring or something, or not that many people took the exam, then they would give back points even without appeal, which is crazy, An exam should be an exam, and if you pass it, they should be testing the same thing. They shouldn't be giving back points and making it harder or difficult based on how much people they want to give the license to.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah. And there's a question. Let me. Someone asks, is getting MBA plus to job opportunities, or does custom broker license is good enough?
I think, uh, I think it's a plus. Like so I learned a lot in the MBA that I pursued. But it was an in-person MBA, and um, I didn't have an undergrad in business, so it was good for me to get the business acumen. It required you to take finance and economics and accounting,
Hmm.
and so I thought it was really critical. And I think it was like a nice notch on the belt. I think again, it's like if you're competing for a job, right, and somebody has it and the other person doesn't, like, when a recruiter is looking at your resume, if you have equal experience, you both have a broker's license and you have an MBA, like, I would think they're probably going to pass your resume along over that other
Hmm.
one because you have the MBA and that person doesn't. So I mean, it's just sort of like you have to think about the cost benefit analysis on it. But for
Hmm.
me, I again, like when I was looking at my career early on, it was about creating the best like career trajectory for myself where I could be the most competitive applying for jobs. Like that's what I tried to focus on.
Hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you. Um, I feel like an MBA and a license are two separate things.
Mhm.
A broker's license is more specific to what you're gonna do. If you're gonna come
Right.
to trade compliance, more specific. At the same time, though, having an MBA, that's gonna probably give you a broader perspective, especially if you don't have a business background. Like
That's
you,
true.
John. I hadn't really taken economics or finance or accounting until I did my MBA as well. So it gives you a different kind of a perspective. And honestly, I don't think MBA is that difficult.
No.
But at the same time, suggest just see how much it's going to cost you. If
Yep.
you're working for a company who's going to pay for an MBA, I mean, that's the most ideal situation, right? So that's when, if you want to decide whether you should do it or you shouldn't do it, if you have a company which is going to kind of pay for it, then you should definitely do it. I mean, again, it's the extra work, right? But at the end, I think it's worth it.
Well, it's a good point because you jogged my memory. When I went to pursue my MBA earlier in my career, I was still kind of new to trade, and I did pass the broker's license, but I remember thinking, well, if I ever want to pivot out of trade compliance, it's good to get the MBA because at least I'm a little bit more well-rounded having it. So that was,
Hmm.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that was my at least my thinking when I was looking at it. So
Yeah, I would think so too, especially if you have a background which is non-related to business, but you want to be in business. I mean,
right.
I feel like that helps a lot. Like you had a psychology bachelor's degree, right? I had a biochemistry, but I didn't want to do research and stuff. So, I
Hmm.
mean, there was if I was gonna come into business, I had to do it some other way, and MBA was one of those steps that I decided to take.
Hmm.
And I feel like for me, it was worth it. That's the reason why initially I even probably when I was applying for jobs and internships at the beginning, that's probably why I got that internship. I mean,
Hmm.
on my side, when I applied for internships and jobs in the beginning, the reason why I got the internship was one, I had some research experience, and two, I had that MBA. So the
Hmm.
MBA was definitely helpful, and that's the reason why I feel like I am where I am today because of that.
Hmm.
At least I had a part to play in it. Without that, it would have been much more difficult for me to uh, compete against people who already, for example, had I guess, a business bachelor's degree
Hmm.
versus me who had a very research oriented biochemistry degree on the side.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And and for anyone who's wondering whether it's a lot of people sometimes ask me if it's worth getting a CCS rather than an LCB.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
is that a no?
oh, I don't think so. But
No,
I'm
you think a licensed custom being a licensed custom broker is much higher,
oh
and
yeah,
getting a CCS
for
is
sure.
not. It's kind of like a more like a certification that you get for attending a webinar. Is that
Yeah,
it?
yeah, I think that's my personal opinion. I don't
Hmm,
that's just been my experience, but I think
hmm,
the LCB holds a lot more weight, but
yeah,
that's
I,
my
I agree with you, and I think it holds more weight is because everyone knows it's a very difficult exam,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it like I took my exam in October 2019, and I obviously they had less than 4% passing rate at that time.
Mhm,
So if I guess to someone who's looking at someone and deciding whether to hire someone with CCS certification or uh, someone who's a licensed custom broker, they would probably give more weight to an LCB because it's an harder exam and it's less people hold that customs broker license.
yeah, for sure, and then CCS, you could keep taking it over and over, I think, until you pass. Like, I don't think it's like the broker's exam where you have to wait 6 months, like, I think you could keep
Mm,
I'm not 100%
yeah.
sure. I mean, the other thing too
Okay.
is if you get the broker's license, then you automatically can get the CCS, and so
Yeah, that's one thing I don't understand. I mean, if they want to make a separate certification, um, I guess it's helpful if you just go for the CCS. But to me, I mean, I've been LCB too, right? So I
yeah,
have that. To me, it doesn't matter if I have the CCS designation or not because I don't honestly, it'll be something that's free, and to
yeah.
me, it doesn't have any value.
Yeah, I agree. Like I got it the one year because I did the export one, and so then I just wound up defaulting and getting the CCS as well. And but I
Mm,
never renewed it because I was like, I
mm,
don't see the value in it personally. That's just me. But like, I think if you don't have the LCB and you want to use it to learn to get the LCB, I can
mhm,
see that. But I'm not. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I think it's a good credential. I just, if I was to choose between the two, I would choose going for the LCB.
And CCS, is that something that you have to renew yearly?
I
I
believe
don't know if you
so.
know or
I think
not.
so. Yeah. Mhm. Yep.
Okay, yeah, with Custom broker license is every 3 years, right?
3 years. Yes,
And it's not like your 3 years begin when you get the license. It's 3 years every 3 years from 1985.
that's right. Yeah. So I think when
That's
I got mine issued in 2013, so I didn't have a full 3 years. I think I only had 2 years or a year, and I had to renew it or something like that.
yeah, yeah. So I feel like a lot of people need to keep that in mind as well,
Yep.
because if I know some people who passed, I think, the last exam, and
Hmm.
then they got their license I don't know, maybe a month or 2 months before the renew date was here. So, from my understanding, they probably had to pay that fee for the renewal again, like a month later.
Oh, really?
So that's something they have to understand and consider too, and just realize that your 3 years doesn't begin when you get the license. It's 3 years from 1985, so it
Right.
doesn't matter when you get the license. You have
That's
to keep
right.
that in mind, because if you lose that license, then
Start all over.
I mean you have to restart everything, and I don't think anyone wants to go through that,
No,
right?
no. If that happened to me, I would just not do it.
I know, right? I know. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, if for some reason I shouldn't forget to pay that fee, but if I do,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a lot of work and a lot
Well,
of
at least
hassle,
they
you
let
know?
you renew it online now, which is nice.
Yeah.
The first
Yeah,
time,
yeah, that's what
the first go around, I
that's
had to mail a check or something. I don't remember.
uh,
I think or maybe I went. No, you know what? I think I went down to because I did mine in Philadelphia.
mhm.
And I remember I actually went down there because I was like so paranoid that they wouldn't get it. And I gave them the
Yeah.
check. So,
Uh-huh.
but then
No,
the next
I know
year
what
they're
you mean.
online.
Yeah, they have it online. I actually paid mine online as well. It was a pretty simple process. I was
Yeah,
kind of
it's
surprised
really
how
nice.
simple it was.
Yeah, that is really nice because then you get a record of it and everything.
hmm Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's a pretty nice addition. I hope they make everything electronic and more convenient for everyone who's in this community.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Um. Also, so I guess through your career, you probably interviewed different kinds of people, right?
Mhm.
When you interview people, do you ever, let's say they're a customs broker and they have some experience in trade compliance as well. Have you ever looked at their bachelor's degree and kind of has that ever mattered to you?
Um, Only in if I was hiring for roles that required like chemical classification or something,
Mm.
and like it's
So,
helpful to have undergrad in chemistry, but it's not
mhm,
even like even you don't have to have that to do that role. You just have to be willing to learn organic
mhm,
functional groups or something. So, but like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a leg up. But other than
mhm.
that, no, not really.
So that's kind of given an edge to someone, like kind of like an MBA, I mean, if they were gonna do something which was gonna involve their I guess category of whatever they did, then it would matter and
Right.
give them an edge.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean,
for example, if you were an engineer and you're applying for an entry level classification role, then I would probably give you an edge over someone who's never seen blueprints in their entire life.
right. Yeah, exactly. That's true.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense too. And I feel like if people are applying, especially if they don't have a trade compliance background, they should maybe look for roles which are kind of, I guess, that connect some way to something they've done in the past. Like we just spoke, an engineer background would be connected to a classification portion. The
Hmm.
other hand, um, maybe having a chemistry based background would mean that you should be applying to pharmaceutical companies and in their trade compliance departments. So
Hmm.
because for example, just within classification, they have different categories of people that are specialized in different type of items. For example, textiles. They have they have people that classify just for textiles.
Yeah, that's
They
right.
have people that classify just for chemical based stuff,
That's
because
right.
chemistry and textile is so difficult. And then there are some people who specialize only, for example, on the food stuff. It's because all these categories, even though they all fall under classification, it matters if you can for example, if you're reading a chemical, just to
Mhm,
classify that, you might need to know how to read that chemical formula. If you don't know that, there's no way you won't even know how to begin. And sometimes, whether it's chemistry, whether it's textiles, whether it's food and beverages, that kind of stuff,
mhm.
it's they're kind of like their own language. And if you know their language, and then it kind of gives you an edge over other people who don't know their language.
No, it's true. I mean, like, when I worked at Merck early in my career, that's all I did was chemical classifications, and,
Hmm.
um, it's funny for me, it's it's super easy. It's easy
Hmm.
for me to do that, but if I have to classify, like, electronics, like, I don't
Hmm.
particularly like it because it's foreign to me. So, like, PCBs, PCBAs, like, I can do it, but it's not like, I don't enjoy it because it's foreign. You don't know, like, I don't know the explanatory notes off the top of my head, kind of a thing, whereas, the chemicals, like, you just know the rules, like, you start to learn
Hmm.
them. So, yeah, it's definitely true. Like, you can become very specialized.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, if you can somehow show whichever non-trade compliance skills you have, if you can somehow connect that to whatever you want to go into, it's
Mhm.
going to be really, really beneficial to you at the end. That's going to be your start, and from there on, you can kind of decide how you want to proceed, whether you want to be in the same industry within the same company, or if you want to go somewhere else. You can decide later on, but somehow, just to get your foot into the door, you need to be able to kind of have a plan and follow their plan. I mean, throughout your career, even without away from trade compliance, and just like any job, you kind of have to face the rejection until you get a yes, right? So even if it's someone who doesn't have a background, um, who doesn't have a trade background, um, it's okay, Um, it's okay to get that rejection, and it's totally fine. You should be okay with it. You just need that first yes to enter this field, and then from there on, you can move forward.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, we're pretty much done. I would say, do you want to say anything to the audience? Any advice before you go? Because honestly, you've been a great guest on this show, and if you're okay with anyone reaching out to you on LinkedIn, connecting, you can let them know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Feel free. Yeah, and it's been uh, a fortuitous career for me, so I enjoy it. It's challenging, has its ups and downs, but it's no day's the same, so it's fun, and yeah, I think, and it has a really good future. Like, the horizon for it is very positive, right? Like, even with all the automation and AI and everything, like, still trade compliance is still necessary. So,
I
um,
agree, and it's gonna get more important in the future.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So, but yeah,
Thank you
thanks for
so
having me.
much.
It was fun talking to you, and yeah, feel free to
Yeah,
connect.
same here. Thank you so much for joining me on here. I really appreciate it, and best of luck with everything. And again, to all the audience who's watching, feel free to reach out to Jonathan on LinkedIn if you ever have a question for him. Like he said, he's totally okay with it. So, and again, thank you so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate it again.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, have a good night.
Yep, you too.